Okay, good morning, all of you. So today we are going to start our first chapter, that is resources and development of power in India. So in this particular chapter, we are going to concentrating on the resources from which we are developed the power in India and the development of those resources. Okay, and the different types of the power plant, that also we are going to see the general information regarding the different types of the power plants, its advantages, disadvantages, and the detailed analysis of the power plants. Also, we are going to see the different corporations like the NTPC, HSPC, and their role in the power development in India, and the power generation in the private sectors, Indian electricity grid code, and the present power position in the India and world. Okay, so we are going to cover in unit number 1, that is resources and the development of power in India. So basically, what is meant by power plant? As we know, the power means what? It will be the energy we get or the work done per second. That is the general definition of the power. Okay, but what is meant by power plant? As we know, there are many types of the devices. We can classify those devices, mechanical devices, into the two form. Okay. So first one is the power consumption devices, and second one is the power producing devices. So generally, the power producing devices will give us power as output, and the power consumption devices will we have to give some external power to those devices. Now, generally, what we do for any type of the work generation, we require some power. We have to give some external power to carry out that particular work. So that power will be generated from the power plant. Okay. So in power plant, or just we can define the power plant is the basically industrial location or the any particular devices or the plant which will gives us or generate the power. Okay. Generally, the energy, different types of the energy will be converted from different forms to the different form into the electricity. Generally, in the electricity in the power plant, because as we know, electricity is the high grade type of energy, and we can use it efficiently in the many applications. So the power plant or power generating station is basically industrial location that is utilized for generation and the distribution of the electric power in mass scale. Means its capacity will be very high. Generally, its capacity will be in the orders of 1,000 watts or the megawatts, gigawatts, etc. The location of these power plants are generally near to the load. Now, what is meant by load? So, where we use consumes the power or the consumes the electricity, that particular point is known as the load. Okay, so generally these power plants has been installed near to the load, or in some cases it is many kilometers away from those particular load. Okay, so as we take an example of the thermal power plants, now in Maharashtra or in particular in our region, the thermal power plants has been installed into the Gadchiroli section or the Vidarbha section, right? So here we have to transmit that particular power which is generated far away from here, or in many cases this power plants has been installed near to the load. Now in the case of hydroelectric power plant, the Koina hydroelectric power plant, that hydroelectric power plant has been installed near to the load, right? Near to the different cities where we consumes the power or the consumes the electricity. So this location will be depends upon in many other factors, the availability of the fuel, and also the installment of the power plant. So for installment of the power plant, we required very huge land and the water demand also. Generally, for the thermal power plants, we required water as well as the huge land, and the capital cost is also very high. So this location is depending upon the different factors. Now, the classification of the power plants. So we classify the power plants in many types. Okay, we can classify it generally in the two types, that is the non-renewable sources of the energy and power plants which are using the non-conventional or the renewable sources of the energy. So the power plant which are using non-renewable sources of energy means what? In that case, there will be a non-renewable sources we are using for generating the electricity, like the steam or thermal power plant, where we use coal as a main fuel, right? Then nuclear or atomic power plant, where we use the nuclear or the chemical energy or nuclear energy of the particular substance to convert that energy. We convert that energy into the thermal energy, and then we are using to produce the power. Next will be diesel power plant. Here the fuel is the diesel. So by using the IC, internal combustion engines, we can generate the power, or we can use the gas power plant where we using the turbine, gas turbine to produce the power, or the convert the energy from chemical energy to the electrical energy. Then obviously hydroelectrical power plant, where we use the hydraulic energy of the water or the potential energy of the water, and to be converting that potential energy into the electric energy. And these are the power plants which are using the conventional form of energy or conventional resources of the energy. In that, the generally or maximum energy which we are using today, it is steam power plant, or we are producing by using the steam power plant. Okay, so these particular power plants are very important, the function of the steam power plant and how they are working, then what are the different factors which are affecting the efficiency of the steam power plant, that also we are going to see. Generally, the general thermodynamic analysis of the steam power plant you already studied. The steam power plants or the thermal power plants are generally working on the Rankine cycle. Okay, and it will contain four main parts like the boiler, then the uh, turbine, then condenser, and the pump. So that basics also we are going to revise, and the different detailed study regarding the available thermal power plants in India, and what is the share of this thermal power plant or the energy generated by the thermal power plant in India, that is also going to see. The nuclear power plant we already know, which is used to convert nuclear energy of that by using the nuclear fusion reaction, we are producing the energy. In diesel power plant, we are using diesel as a fuel, and we are burning that fuel in the internal combustion engine and produces the power. Similarly, the gas power plant, it is having the gas turbine, right? So that also basics you already studied, and a hydroelectric power plant, that is also you know. Okay, here the hydroelectric power plant is the renewable type of resources, which is based upon renewable type of resources. Okay, but it is the conventional type of power plant, because in many from 100 to 200 years, we are using the hydroelectrical energy to produce the power. So it is divided or the classified in the conventional type of the power plant. Non-conventional type of power plants, which will mostly contain the renewable resources, like the solar thermal power plant. Okay, solar thermal power plant means we are using solar radiation to generate the steam, and that steam is being again used to generate the power. Then wind power or the wind generation power plant, those are also renewable type of power plants. Wave power plants, tidal power plants, geothermal power plants, biomass power plant, and ocean thermal power plants. Okay, so these are the different types of the renewable resources or the power plant we are using in current conditions. Generally, most of the power will be produced by the solar and wind, and also through the geothermal power plant. Okay, so other type of resources are or the other type of the power plants are in the development conditions now. Okay, so these are the main classification of the power plant. You can also classify based upon the resources of the energy. Okay, or you can also classify it based upon the basic load and the peak load. Okay, means these particular power plants has been designed to carry out the basic load, or some power plant will be designed to carry out the peak load. Okay, So other classification you can see based upon the fuel type, where we can classify the different power plant based upon the fuel which is used to generate the electricity. So there will be coal-fired power plant, then diesel or HFO power plant, then gas power plant, and the nuclear power plant. In many cases, we are using the radiation, sun radiation power plant, or the solar power plant we are using, then wind power plant. So these are the different classifications based upon the different factors. Okay, and we can classify the power plant based upon the fuels also. Now, based on the place, or what is connected to the, it is connected to the national grid system, or it is connected to the state grid system. Now what is meant by grid system? Grid system means it is the connections, that is the electrical and connections, or the connection between the two grids, from the national grid to the state grid, or the two different state grids. Those are known as the national grid system. Okay, or isolated power plants. Now the central power plants means which are connected with the national grid system, means whatever the power generated by the power plant, it is directly provided to the national grid system, or the uh, directly provided to the national grid system. And in the isolated power plant means what? The particular power plant which are generate the electricity and only provide that electricity to the particular customer. Okay, that may be one or two customers are there. So that is known as the isolated power plant. It does not connected with the national grid. Okay, it is only provide this particular energy, or whatever the power produced in the isolated power plant, it is used by the particular customers only. Okay, it is not directly connected to the national grid system. So based upon that also we can classify the power plant, like the central power plant, isolated power plant, etc. The next factor on which we can classify the power plant, that is based upon load type of the power plant. Now, what is the how to classify that one? It is classified into the two types. That is the base load power plant and the peak load power plant. Okay. So base load power plant means what? Now, first of all, you must know what is meant by base load and what is meant by peak load. Now consider there is one city, okay, and for that city, in this particular city, their continuous demand of the electricity is there. Okay, now this demand will be vary with respect to the time. Okay, so when we draw the graph time versus load, you will see the requirement or the demand for this particular power has been changed with respect to time. Okay, in some time it will having the 20 megawatts, it will require the 20 megawatts. Okay, in sometimes it will require 17 megawatts. Okay, so this is the variation. Because of this variation of this load, whenever we design in a particular power plant, we must know what is the its base load and what is the peak load. Now, the continuous requirement or the continuous demand of the electricity, how much power we continuously require, that is known as the base load. So, considering the minimum requirement of this particular city, it always required the 15 megawatt of electricity each day. Okay, so if you consider this 15 as a base load, means we have to supply this 15 megawatt of energy, or the 15 megawatt of electricity. Now this is known as the base load power plants, or this is known as the base load. And the power plant which is continuously producing this 15 megawatt of energy or the electricity, that is known as the base load power plant. Okay, and it is designed for this 15 megawatts of energy. Okay, it will always produce this 15 megawatt of energy. Now whenever we select the base load power plant from these different types of the power plant, like the thermal power plant, nuclear power plant, we must assure that that particular power plant will continuously produce this base load, or continuously produce this 15 megawatt of energy. Now peak load power plant means what? In many times in this particular day, the city will require the 20 megawatt of energy, maximum 20 megawatt of energy it will require. So now Whenever we define the base load, we are designing the base load based upon the base load power plant based upon the base load, which is the continuous requirement of electricity or the power, that is the 15 megawatts. Now, in many times or many instances are there where we will require the 20 megawatts of energy. Okay, so it will require 20 megawatt of energy, maximum 20 megawatt of energy. Now, in that case, we have to design the power plant which will produce this extra 5 megawatt of energy. Okay, and this power plant will only in working when we require this higher electricity demand, or if there is any higher electricity demand or the power demand. Okay, so we are designing, for this particular example, we are designing the peak load power plant for the 5 megawatt of capacity. Okay, means what? This, whenever the peak demand is there or the requirement is there, in that case only we are going to switch on this peak load power plant. Now, selecting the peak load power plant, there are many factors which are affecting on the peak load power plant, means which type of a power plant we are going to install for, which will absorb the peak load. Okay, for that there are the different factors are there, like the starting time for the power plant, than the uh, capital cost of the power plant. Okay, running cost of the power plant, those factors are going to be affect. Also, the size of the power plant, the construction time of the power plant, so all those factors are going to be uh, which are we must be consider whenever we choose or the design any particular peak load power plant. So here the base load is the 15 megawatts and peak load is the 20 megawatts. So whenever the power plant which is continuously producing this 15 megawatt of energy, that is known as the base load power plant, and the power plant which is used to achieve the peak load, okay, that is the 20 megawatt. That particular peak load power plant is known as the peak load power plant. Okay, it is used whenever we require any whenever we require any particular higher or the peak power at the during that particular time only. Okay, so based upon these particular different types of the factors, we can classify the power plants. Now, next point we must be discussed that present power position or the power conditions in the India. Now, as we know, there are many type of power plants has been installed in the India ever since from the independence. So, from that, nearly the thermal power plants, it will constitute the 58%. Means 58% of electricity or the power has been generated by the thermal power plant. Okay, and mainly in India these thermal power plants are working, or the fuel for the thermal power plant is the coal. As we already know, there are many thermal power plants are available in Maharashtra, also in the Vidarbha region. So those, the main fuel for this particular thermal power plant is the coal. Okay, now 58% of energy in India's electricity has been generated by using the thermal power plant, and the remaining will be generated by using the hydroelectric power plant, nuclear power plant, wind energy power plant, bio power plant, solar power plant. Nearly the 12% will be generated by the hydroelectric power plant, 16% has been generated by the solar power plant. In recent year, we are increasing this percentage of the solar power plant, okay, or the solar power, right? Also, we are increasing the nuclear power plants, the capacity of the nuclear power plant, so we will generate the more and more energy without affecting the environment. Now, the hydroelectric power plant share will be 11.42, or nearly 12% of the energy has been generated through the hydroelectric power plant. Now, why we required or why we study this particular percentage? Because we whenever we go for study of the any power plant or the in energy engineering, you must know what is the condition, today's condition in the country. Okay, because as we know, the nearly 60% of the energy will be generated by the thermal power plant, so we have to concentrate on this thermal power plant. how to design how to design thermal power plant, what are the different systems which are used in the thermal power plant, you must know. Okay, and based upon that, you can carry out the different analysis. It may be to improve the efficiency of the thermal power plant, or it may be concentrated on the whatever the pollution coming out from the thermal power plant, how to tackle that particular problem. So that different factors we can consider. Also, we have to deeply study carry out the deep study of the hydroelectric power plant, solar power plant, wind power plant, nuclear power plant. Okay, so these power position, or these are the distribution of the power produced in the India as on today. Okay, also I will share you some website so you can understand the power generation inside the India. Okay, 1 minute. Okay, so this is the website, that is the cea.nic.in. It is the government website of the Central Electricity Authority. So here from this, if you go for the dashboard, you will see different numbers. Okay, so if you see here, these are the power supply position in the November 2022. Okay, so from here you can also see the peak demand and the peak meet. Okay, that is the peak demand means what? That is the maximum demand or the maximum electricity requirement, and versus to that how much maximum load or the maximum demand has been achieved. Okay, that also you can see the installed capacity. So this is the installed capacity. It is the sector wise. Now, what are the sectors? There are three sectors generally: the central sector, private sector, and the state sector. Central sector means those are the power plants uh, which are under control of the central. Private sector, those are the private power plants, and the state sector which are under control of the state governments. If you go for installed capacity composition, you can also see the different composition or the different types of the power plants through which energy has been generated. So you can see the coal, generally the thermal power plants will constitute the 51% now. Okay, its total capacity is nearly 2,03,985 megawatts. Okay, it is in the megawatts. Also, the next one is the renewable energy resources. Okay, it will constitute the nearly 30% of the total energy generated, or this is the installed capacity. Also, hydroelectric power plant will contain 12%, nuclear energy will contain nearly 2%, and the gas will contain the 7%. Here, the gas power plants those are the gas power plants. Okay, you can also see the power generation, that is the variation of the power generation. You can see most of the power will be generated by using the thermal power plant. You can see here nearly 93.30 billion units of the electricity will be generated through the thermal power plants. The nuclear power plants will constitute 3.41 billion units. Hydro power plant will contain 22.02 billion units. Okay, so these are the this is the constitute or the we can say the shares of the different types of the power plants that you can see here. Okay, also you can see the plan-wise growth of the capacity or the electricity sector inside India. Okay, here also you can see the installed capacity, then the numbers of village electrified, then the per capita power consumptions. That is also you can see in this particular chart. So from here, what we are going to see, we will see the uh, shares of the that particular types of the power plant inside the power generation in the India. Okay, that you can observe here. Also, there is another website. Okay, that is the NPP National Power Portal. Here also you can see the installed capacity, and if you see, you will see the installed capacity of the different types of the power plant or the power generated from the different types of the power plant from this particular dashboard. I think it is taking some time. So another website is there. Okay, another website is there, that is the World Power Energy Data or the World Energy and Climate Statistics Yearbook. That is for the 2022 yearbook. So whenever we saw the production of the electricity all over the world, you will see the China will dominating most of this particular the production of the electricity. Okay, it will produce 8,536 trillion watt hour or the units trillion units of the electricity energy. Next one is the United States, and next one is the India. Okay, India nearly generate 1,700 uh, trillion units of the electricity, and also it will consumes most of the electrical energy. Okay, you can see the increment in the generation capacity. Okay, generation capacity of the world. From here you can see. Okay, so similarly you can also find out the consumption of the electricity. Okay, so this one is the consumption. In this particular consumption also, China will dominating. It will dominate. It will consume most of the electric energy than United States, and third will the India. So you can see most of the electricity generated in the India through the particular thermal power plants. Also, this is the generation electricity, world electricity generation by the fuels or the different types of the fuels, and you will see nearly 40% of the total electricity in the world has been generated through the coal by using the coal as a fuel. So uh, we are mostly dependent upon the thermal power plant as we saw. Okay, so okay, so that is the different types and the statistics of the power, the present power generation and the present power position of the India. Okay, so we are stopping here. In the next lecture, we are going to detail seeing the details of the different types of the power plant or like the hydroelectric power plant, then the particularly the thermal power plant. Okay. Okay, so in the next lecture, we are going to see the details of different types of the power plants, how they are working, what are the advantages and the disadvantages, and also the different factors we have to consider whenever we choosing that particular power plant. Okay, so we are stopped here.